Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Costume Co. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. Today, I am doing an interview with a well-known costume designer. Her name is Ellen Falguiere. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. And she just did a movie called Spinning Gold. It is now out in theaters, limited release. So we're here to talk about the costumes. They're 1970s, which is like one of my favorite genres. So thank you so much, Ellen, for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. It is my pleasure.
For people who don't know you, why don't you tell everybody a bit about yourself and how you got into costume design?
I am, well, I got into it. My family is in the film industry. So my aunt and uncle had a production company in Miami, a print and commercial production company. And I worked in their print production company. I also went to film school and studied film and costume design, made a student film. And I worked in their production company, sort of learned the ropes. And in my early days, I did a lot of print and I did a lot of commercials. And then I worked in television and film in Miami, Florida, in Miami Beach. Actually, I have kind of started in the supermodel era in the late 90s with a lot of like Patrick Dumas-Chelier, Vogue. He was actually a client of my aunt's for 10 years. And so I kind of started with a fashion background and then moved into film and television.
That's a very familiar story. I hear a lot of designers who do start in fashion, and many of them even study fashion. Did you study fashion in school?
Actually, I studied film, like how to like actually film production and how to make movies. And in when I was in film school, I I was studying camera, production design, all the aspects of it. But then when we went to go make the student film, I actually chose costume design because I fell in love with that aspect of filmmaking and storytelling. And that was sort of where my passion lied. And sort of a little light bulb went off in my head. And I just felt like that was really kind of what I wanted to do in my journey. And I kind of took it from there.
That's great. So now for this particular movie, how did you get involved with Spinning Gold?
Well, my agent contacted me and the production manager contacted me, and they said that, we've got this great script. And I read the script and I talked to the UPM and they put me in touch with Tim. I did an interview with Tim Bogart, and it just happened to sort of kind of come together between knowing the production manager. I also ended up knowing Larry Marks from another show, and we met and we talked about the 70s costumes and the genre, and everything just kind of fell into place.
Excellent. Speaking of 70s, so had you I don't know if you've done period films, but was this your first sort of venture into 1970s costumes, or had you worked in this before?
I had done a 1970s movie before called My Sexiest Year, with Harvey Keitel, Amber Valletta, and Carolina Kurkova. It was based on supermodels in the 70s, and it was I had done 70s before. I had done 60s before. I finished a movie called Charming the Hearts of Men, which was all 60s. I had done a television series in Florida called Magic City. So I've done a lot of period films and television before. So I was definitely period costume design. You have to go about it in a completely different way than modern day.
Well, I one of the things I was going to tell you is that growing up, I was a huge Donna Summer fan, and I told my parents that she was probably the biggest superstar in the world, and I believed at the time. I actually really loved her. So before you started on this, like, were you familiar with the musical acts? I'm assuming you knew most of them. How familiar were you with some of these characters, some of these actors, or sorry,
Oh my
musicians?
gosh. I was a huge Donna Summer fan. I loved all the different kinds of music, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Kiss, Bill Withers, the Isley Brothers. I just loved the Village People. It was just, I mean, it was really a costume designer's dream. I was salivating. I mean, I can barely even talk about it right now. It was just really a designer's dream, because there's so many different disco, rock and roll, Parliament funk, just the funkiness of that whole world. I mean, it was just really a costume designer's dream.
So, so regarding like your design process, like how do you go about designing a show like this?
Well, the first thing is to read and break down the script. I probably read the script about 20 times. I try to memorize it. I break it down. I work out the story days, how many costumes I need. That really helps a lot with budgeting. That helps put together crew. I sort of identify, there's sort of like points in the script where I identify where I could custom make things, where I would like to, I mean, the visions just start going. And I guess after that, you start doing research. These are all based on real characters. So there's a lot of research that goes into a project like this. So you start building your research Dropbox folders, and on each one of the characters, both their regular lives, their stage lives, and you just start educating yourself on all the different genres. Plus then you just start building um ideas and inspiration of, not necessarily always from the real people, but just what people were doing in the 70s, parties, rock and roll, businessmen, just all the different sort of categories of clothing, and the different ways that people wore them, from basically conservative to disco, and all the different things that we might be able to capture in this film. And then I sort of narrow things down to my favorites and inspiration, and I just really kind of yeah, just sort of build the world with research boards. I start creating boards for every single one of the characters, and I usually run those by the director. So for instance, I'll build boards on Neil, I'll build boards on Joyce, all the different characters for office looks, and for when they're backstage, things like that. So it's a lot of work, which is actually my favorite part. I love doing all of that.
Yeah, actually, it's sort of like I love doing when I'm doing my channel. I love the research. It's always my favorite aspect of it, getting to look at, especially if you're doing historical research. It's so much fun. And speaking of research, like you did mood boards, but what's your process for doing research on a period show? Do you attempt to be period accurate, or do you take some liberties there? Like, what was your approach on that whole thing?
Well, I actually take liberties. I mean, I use the research as inspiration, but I want to be period accurate, of course, but at the same time, I want to tell a story. So I use the clothes, and all the magic sort of comes alive in the fitting room. So when we have all the clothes in the fitting room, and we're sort of creating for this, because each one of the characters had so many costume changes. Neil had 41. Joyce had about 30. Each one of the characters had about 30 to 35 costume changes. It was really big. And so I basically kind of went about it in, let's get some good foundations, let's get some good pieces, let's get some iconic things in their closet that work really well. And then, you know, if Tim starts to add scenes, or, you know, things change or whatever, then I can put together pieces that work well together. I was constantly putting pieces together, and you know, making sure that all the pieces look good together, because there was a lot of group scenes. And so I didn't want too many oranges or too many burgundies or too many browns or too many blacks or things like that. So I was constantly putting together outfits based on the fitting that I did in their closet. So I built closets, and then I went about creating outfits. And some of the outfits I would, you know, fit as we went along in the production. There were special scenes like Vegas or the casino nights, and I needed different outfits or special outfits for you know, different scenes. So
Okay, so this is sort of a fun question. Hopefully you're okay with it. So I know a lot of the outfits are very skimpy and things were very different in the 70s. So were undergarments a bit of a challenge for you? Like how did you sort of go about that process? Did you try to use sort of period accurate undergarments, or what did you do there?
well, it sort of varied with the outfits, obviously, but for the women, I used a lot of underwear that were the seamless underwear that didn't have any elastic. They make them they're just like second skin. They call them commandos. So I just made them, you know, sort of disappear underneath the clothing for the women. And a lot of times we used nipple covers, and we didn't use bras because the 70s, you know, some of the outfits didn't have bras and things like that. And then, you know, where we needed, we used, and things like that. But and a lot of like the Kiss rock and roll costumes, we used dance belts for the men and things like that. So, you know, we sort of took that into consideration underneath the costumes, what you know, we could cheat, and you know, what we sort of needed to use less. Less is more.
Exactly. So it just sort of disappears. It just sort of,
It
you know, you don't notice it. Yeah. Well, that's what I was trying to figure out. I was like, Hannah, what's going on there? Um, so do you like, it sounds like there was a lot of costumes because each character you said had quite a few in their closet. So do you have any idea like what the total amount of costumes that you had to create for this movie were?
I think it was like 200 and I want to say 59 or 58, 258
Hmm.
costumes. We had the choir, we had Parliament Funk, and uh, Bill Withers, Edward Hawkins, Kiss. Their real clothes were, you know, each one of them non-stage clothes wise also had like about 5 or 6 costumes. Donna Summer, she had, I believe, 14. Then there was their stage costumes, but the main cast with their, you know, ensemble between Buddha Records and Casablanca Records, they had quite a bit. Neil had 41, Joyce had about 30, and each Jay had about 30, Dan 30. So it was quite a lot. Quite a
Yeah, because
lot.
also you're dealing with a couple of timelines, right? You're having flashbacks, you're having flash forwards, sort of, you know, as he's telling the story. So you're having to, you know, that's quite a bit to manage. Now, and so did you do like some were custom, some were vintage? Like, how did you sort of like source your clothing, or did you build most of the clothing? How did you go about that?
I rented a lot of the vintage clothing. So things, we shot this in New Jersey. So I rented a lot of things from some of the costume houses, and then we vintage shopped a lot, and then we custom made, you know, some things as well. So it was a mix. It was a mix, but a lot of the vintage clothing There's a couple of costume houses that I really like here in New York. But they were like 3 hours away. So we would have to drive about 3 hours to upstate New York and, spend a couple of days pulling clothes and getting everything, back to New Jersey, back to the costume space and fit. So we spent quite a lot of time accumulating the different jeans, because we also had crowd scenes. We had to do a lot of crowds, we had to do a lot of office staff, there was a lot of extras. So we're creating a variety of looks. So it was quite a lot of clothes.
Yeah, the more casual clothes, like, you've got the stage costumes, but the more casual clothes, those were like my favorite. I always love those. Like the shirts, the men's shirts are so awesome. And then like just, the jeans and the accessories. Like I love those, all those parts of the movie. Now, do you have a very big team? Like how many people did you have to be able to, put this all together to do this whole show?
Well, I had two ACDs. I had a costume supervisor. I had a truck person. I had two background costumers, two set people, three tailors. And then I had outside sourced a lot of the Broadway costume houses to make things for me, like Bethany Joy and Barack did a lot of our leather studding. Bethany Joy built the ostrich feather boa capelet for Donna Summer.
Yeah, she's wearing it behind you there.
Yes.
There she is. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and then I had let's see here, the Donna Summer dress. We built that. Here's a lot of the Parliament Funk stuff. This was built. Some of these are the grandchildren of the Funkadelics.
Oh, no way. The cast there?
Yeah, the cast. These are the grandchildren of the original Funkadelics.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
That was Khalifa,
Mhm.
with the platform shoes and the whole, costume with the fringe and
Mhm.
things. So a lot of the stage stuff we made, and then we made the Donna Summer dress. That was my inspiration for that was Norma Kamali with
Oh,
the
mhm.
and the halter style that was very particular in the 70s. This is Pink Sweats, and he's wearing Bill Withers. He's playing Bill Withers. Dan Fogler. These are just some of the images.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and the leather jackets too. That's the other thing I really love. The leather jackets from the 70s. Were those vintage?
Those are vintage.
Yeah. There a lot I've seen a lot of them when I've gone to vintage stores. Like you can still find them. It's just getting the sizing. And what about footwear? That must have been like difficult. Were you able to find footwear, or did you have to custom make some footwear?
uh we custom made the Kiss footwear. We had to add a lot of studs and feathers, and we were buying a lot of the platforms. We had to add, and we had to redesign a lot of it because there was a lot of things that we were trying to get a basic base of a shoe, and then craft them or paint them or add soles or add, we had to do a lot of work on shoes. We
Mhm.
also do a lot of studding, leather work. We had to do a lot of it was just a lot of custom made, especially for Kiss, because Kiss had three different versions of the Kiss costumes, because there was the Century Plaza, the Cobo Hall 1, Cobo Hall 2. We had to do a lot of because the story is sort of them figuring it out, which is great because they don't have it actually figured out in the beginning of the story about what they're doing.
Yeah, like
It's
there's this evolution that they're going through. I love that. That's really cool. It's kind of like when a superhero is trying to like find their costume and then they're like, "Oh, this is a little off." And then eventually by the end they have the solid one.
Right, right. So it's kind of great because we start out where, they're just kind of rock and roll dudes and they're trying to figure it out and they haven't quite figured out what their gimmick is. As they become more successful, their costumes get bigger. So by the end, the final permutation of the Kiss costumes, we've added the feathers and the studs and all of the trims and so it's quite elaborate by the time we get to the end with the spikes and all of that. But in the very beginning, it's just kind of basically leather pants and the platforms aren't very big, and so there was just a lot of building upon the base look and figuring it all out. So
Mhm.
that
Well,
was
speaking of Kiss, I'd read in the press release that you weren't allowed to use any of their designs. Like you had to sort of your own interpretation. Is there some kind of copyright on their design?
yes, they've copyrighted the makeup. Gene
Okay.
Simmons is very smart. The
Hmm.
makeup, they've copyrighted the costumes, the everything. So if they had makeup that was like a star, then maybe we just did one eye and in the very beginning, because that's also part of the story, is just the story is them figuring it out. It doesn't
Hmm.
start out with them having it figured out. So um that's also sticking true to the story, is figuring it all out. But yeah, we modified a lot of the designs. We used the from magazines and from all kinds of research. I mean, we looked at a lot of the designs, but their designs would even change on stage. They weren't always the same exact costume.
Hmm.
Even though it looked like they were the same costume, they really weren't. They would add capes, they would add feathers, they would add different trim. Some of them looked kind of space age. There was a lot of quilting on Ace Frehley's costume, so we added a lot of quilting, but we just took liberties and just made it up and what looked good on the actor. That's important, to make sure that it looks good on the actor and that they feel comfortable, because a lot of these people are real musicians. So, they have to wear this on stage and play guitars,
Yeah,
play
like because Paul Stanley always loved these like really deep scoop neck things where all his chest hair showing. Like it's a little outrageous, right? By the way, do you know offhand, like I know like Queen, like the designer, a lot of was like Zandra Rose, but do you know who was it Gene Simmons who did the design for their outfits originally?
I no, actually it was Joyce, their manager.
Oh, that's very cool. Okay. So and then did she sew them as well? Like, or did they have them eventually? Like, would she try to cobble them together at the beginning or
Well, it's funny because I met the real Joyce. She
Oh,
was
you did. That's so cool.
and I actually did a fitting on her and dressed her and put her in one of the scenes. So she came up with it. She was their manager. She was coming up with the costumes and the makeup and the whole thing.
That's
So
so cool.
she, really kind of designed, I think, the first evolution of these costumes. And because I talked to her at length about it, and she said, oh, back in the day I would do it. She said she was doing everything. She was doing the costumes, she was doing the makeup, and then of course now then they started to get people, as they got bigger, to do the costumes and seamstresses and to make things. But she did it. Joyce did it.
That's amazing. I love that. That's such a cool story. So for you, I mean, obviously the kiss for, that was quite a challenge. Is there anything that you can think of like costume wise that was really challenging, like the most challenging for you?
I just think the volume and making sure everybody looked good in the scenes, and to make sure like that none of the colors were clashing, and it was just it was a lot of group scenes, a lot of costume changes, a lot of story days, and just figuring all of that out and keeping all of that straight and keeping everybody looking great. And I think that was sort of the challenge, was just just keeping everything fresh and looking like it's a new costume. Also kind of keeping because the 70s can get kind of, if you're not careful, jokey,
Yeah.
with the
Hmm.
collars and the colors and keeping
Yeah.
things out. And so I felt like it was always this fine line, because you want it to be sexy and you want it to be rock and roll and you want it to be beautiful and you want it to stay true to the story. But I was always kind of walking that fine line of, maybe is that collar a little bit too big? Maybe it needs to be a little bit smaller, or, this is kind of more of a serious meeting, so maybe I should just tone it down with the colors in this one and go with a softer palette, or this is kind of a sexier moment or a powerful moment. So I would play with color a lot, and as far as the characters and what was going on in the story, and mapping that out, just mapping it all out was like a big challenge for me.
That's a great answer. Actually, just looking at the one behind you, like you've got all these beautiful sort of earthy colors. Like that's the one thing that I found about the 70s. You've got the warmth, like it's very warm looking, right? But then you've got a little bit of the red, but the red is still kind of warm. So the palette of the 70s can be really great. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, but I'm just a really big fan of in period costume, looking at the wallpaper, looking
Mhm.
at that, and like composing everything in that's going on in the scene. Like his vest is picking up on her jacket, and just making sure that it is a really nice balance, and that what you're capturing in the frame looks balanced and looks beautiful.
Mhm.
And I'm
It looks great
really
with the production design too, like that sort of like that beautiful like green chair there, and then you've got like the nice sandblasted sort of brick. It's a beautiful like composition, almost like a tableau.
right. So when I design period movies, I'm really into that, and I
Mhm.
go make sure that I look at the sets, I look at what's going on, and I really think about what I'm putting together for each actor. So sometimes because when we have so many costumes, you can't be in fittings for hours and hours and hours with actors putting together every single permutation. So you just build a really great closet and make sure you've got really great pieces. And then on my own time, I put them together. So sometimes, when I put the costume in their room for them to get dressed for the day, they're like, oh, I don't remember putting this together. And so I would check on them, before they would go to set, because they remember the pieces, they just don't remember them being put together that way. But it also makes it more realistic, because
Mhm.
in your closet, you have all these pieces, but you put them together differently every day, even though they're in your closet, they're part of your look.
Yeah, and you might like have a jacket on, but then you'll take it off because you're too warm, and you might switch that out for something else if you go out for dinner. So it's like, um, I'm so sorry we don't have much more time. Are you okay if I ask you just two more questions?
Sure.
I'm just going to check with Stephanie. Stephanie, is that okay?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So, yeah, I just want to ask you, which character was your favorite to costume besides the ones that you've already mentioned already here? Or do you have one? It's
That's
like asking someone to pick their favorite child, right? Is there any
um,
that are there any that were really memorable to you that you're like, oh, like what a great memory I had of that one?
well, I loved doing the non-kiss rock and roll looks. I loved doing all of those actors in their non-stage looks. I loved doing that. That was amazing. I loved dressing Donna Summer. I
Mhm.
loved all of her costumes. That was so much fun. That was so fabulous. Getting to pick the feathers and just, recreating a lot of those iconic looks. Um, Neil Bogart, of course.
Mhm. He has lots of great. He's so handsome too. He's from Broadway, I think, right? Like the actor who plays him.
Yeah.
I loved how you did sort of the transitioning from like that 60s sort of I don't know if they would call it a pop band back then, boy band, and then transitioning. I love that because at first I thought that was his real hair, the curly hair, and then I saw him without the wig.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, that was great, like transitioning him because he looked like a completely different person. It was so crazy.
Yeah. And at the very end, one of my favorite costumes is the very, very end. I call it Disco Jesus. Because he's in heaven. And so Tim had said to me, "Oh, it's the very last scene of the movie, and we're playing Last Dance. And my dad's in heaven, and we've got the dancers, and he's playing the piano, and we're playing the final song." And he's like, "What would my father be wearing? What would he be?" And I go, "Well, it has to be 70s heaven.
Hmm.
Disco Jesus."
Totally. Yeah. So before we wrap things up, I just wanted to ask you, because obviously this, you've had this project to put away for quite a while. Is there anything you're working on right now that you're allowed to share?
I just finished a movie called Possum Trot, which is another period piece set in the 90s. And that is, we're getting ready for some additional photography that we have to shoot in June, July. So that's a, really interesting project, also a period piece. So
Is it a movie or is it a TV show?
it's a movie.
Oh, okay. So, and maybe that will be coming out next year, 2024?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Well, you escaped the writer's strike. We were just talking about that, right? Well, Ellen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out today. This has been so much fun. Really great meeting you and chatting with you. And hopefully we can have you back again if you want to come back. And congratulations on the movie.
Thank you so much. It was great meeting you too.
It was great meeting you. And what I'll do is I'll put your contact info, like, your Instagram. Do you have a website? I could add that to the chat as well, or to the description as well below, for if anybody wants to get a hold of you or follow you. Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop recording and then Stephanie, you're going to come in, right?